Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, General. And as the General mentioned, he and I served together many years ago. I believe it was during the Coolidge administration, as I recall. And he was a highly decorated hero of the Vietnam War. And he and I served together trying to justify the existence of the United States Navy and Marine Corps in those days following the Vietnam conflict, when everyone was sure that the United States would never be engaged in another. I'd like to put my remarks to you in the context of the situation that we are facing in the world today. When I became chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, I was made aware that over 60% of the members of the United States Senate have been there 6 years or less. So what I did was to have a series of hearings before the Senate Armed Services Committee, getting what we believed was some of the best minds in America, either Republican or Democrat administrations, Kissinger, Schultz, Albright, Brzezinski, Scowcroft, you name them. We had them before the committee so that we could educate our members and at least try to have a policy-driven budget, at least to some degree, rather than a budget-driven policy. All of those witnesses, whether they be viewed as on the liberal side or the conservative side, all said the same thing, and that is that the world has not seen more crises than it has since the end of World War II. Just as alarming, the world has never seen more refugees than at any time since the end of World War II. That obviously has a direct impact on Turkey as well as other nations in the Middle East. I see, for example, an incredible burden on both Jordan and Lebanon. Today in Lebanon, there are more Syrian children in school than there are Lebanese children. When we see a percentage of population of refugees, think of that percentage and that number would be if it were the case the United States of America. There would be literally tens of millions of refugees. Among many other concerns I have is the stability of particularly Lebanon and Jordan as they continue to experience this influx of refugees from mainly Syria, but now Iraq and even other countries. And of course, on the way over here today, in case you missed it, the Taliban have taken the city of Kunduz, a major city. And meanwhile, we pursue our plans to leave a, quote, embassy-centric force behind in Afghanistan. I promise you, if we do that, we will see a repeat of the Iraq experience, where we walked away from victory. And have no doubt, no matter what they say, two things. One, we had won, and the other is that we could have left a force behind of some 10 to 12,000 people, which would have provided a stability, and the events that we have seen transpire in Iraq would not have happened. And now we see the Russians. Now we see the Russians intending to achieve what they haven't been able to achieve since 1973 in the Middle East, when Anwar Sadat threw the Russians out of Egypt. And our Secretary of State, seeing this happen, calls Lavrov 3 times to try to find out what's going on. My friends, Lavrov should be calling our Secretary of State, because we should have a strategy. We should be acting in the Middle East when we have neither a policy nor a strategy. And the hardship that we are now seeing of refugees fleeing are a direct result of a failure of the United States and our allies in the region. We could have left a force for stability behind in Iraq. We could have armed the Free Syrian Army back 4 years ago when it was recommended to the President by his Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, his head of the CIA, Panetta, and his Secretary of Defense, Bob Gates. The President of the United States and whoever the hell else advises him decided against that. We are reaping the whirlwind because we sowed the wind. And I still believe that the United States of America is the strongest nation in the world by any measurement. I am very optimistic about the future of the United States because we are now energy independent. There's some of us in this room that remember the 70s when OPEC had their hand on the fuel, and many of us waited hours in gas lines at gas stations just to fill up our gas tanks. We are now leading the world in many respects as far as manufacturing technology, and we're certainly leading the world in these devices, which are the most important advance since the invention of the printing press. And that brings me to, in my view, arguably the most important nation in the region, and that's Turkey. It plays an essential role in maintaining regional security and stability. It has helped the United States in a variety of ways. Most recently, Turkey has made significant contributions to NATO missions in the Balkans and Afghanistan. And the strength of our alliance depends on the compatibility and integration of our military forces. And that's why, going forward, I hope that Turkey will pursue weapons capabilities that can be integrated into a stronger NATO defense network. But we also should remember that NATO represents more than just a security alliance. It's a community of values based on the principles of democracy, individual liberty, human rights, and the rule of law. And as a member of NATO, Turkey is committed not only to the collective self-defense and security of all NATO allies, but safeguarding our common values as well. And since we are friends, I must tell you, as a friend, I remain concerned about President Erdogan's efforts to consolidate power, which have too often come at the expense of those values. Turkey's political leadership should recommit itself to fulfill its commitment to the founding principles of our alliance, protect fundamental freedoms, and realize the democratic aspirations of its citizens, including, by the way, freedom of the press. The enduring value of our alliance has been made clear in recent years as the two nations have worked together to counter the Islamic State, and Turkey's recent decision to assist in the fight against ISIL by allowing the use of Turkish base for U.S. fighter at Incirlik for U.S. fighter aircraft has improved our combat capabilities to counter that threat. As foreign fighters seek to join ISIL, Turkey has taken important steps to improve the security of its border, stepping up arrest and prosecution of suspected foreign fighters, and improving information sharing with allies and partners. But as reports suggest, ISIL is replenishing its ranks with more than 1,000 fighters, foreign fighters, per month, and there's a lot that needs to be done. Since the conflict in Syria, Turkey has demonstrated a remarkable humanitarian spirit, becoming the world's largest recipient of refugees with almost 2 million registered refugees and another estimated 1 million that are unregistered. Some countries have restricted entry to Syrian refugees. Turkey has maintained a generous open-door policy despite significant costs and little international support. Such hospitality and openness speaks volume about the character of the Turkish people. But ultimately, it's unfair to expect Turkish generosity to solve this refugee crisis. We have to address the true source of the problem, the war on the Syrian people waged by Bashar Assad and Israel and ISIL. I'd like to remind you that ISIL is the bastard child of Bashar Assad. I would like to remind you that it was Bashar Assad that has barrel bombed some 230,000 or more innocent Syrians, men, women, and children. It's for that reason that General David Petraeus, the architect of the surge, testified before the Senate Armed Services Committee last week that we need to stop the barrel bombing. We need to establish a buffer zone where some of these refugees can come, and we have to have a meaningful train and equip program that fights against Bashar Assad as well as ISIL. My friends, you are not going to convince young Syrian men to go and fight against ISIL alone when Bashar Assad has slaughtered their wives, their mothers, and their children. So we have to defeat ISIL, we have to defeat Bashar Assad, and we have to try to do the best we can to restore some semblance of order in Turkey and, in Syria and Iraq. Today, we have no strategy whatsoever in order to do that. And if anybody here thinks that you can do it with air power alone, you are ignoring the lessons of history and the lessons of tactical warfare. So, is it going to come a time of reckoning where the United States is going to have to resume its traditional leadership role, which it abdicated over 6 years ago? I believe that the United States of America is the strongest in the world. I think we're still the best example of democracy, innovation, freedom, and yet we must resume the cloak and the responsibility of world leadership from which we've abdicated, and we must reassume, because if we do not, we will see further deterioration and the spread of this evil, which has penetrated throughout the Middle East and even into countries like Afghanistan. With that, I'd like to thank you for your friendship. I'd like to thank you for your support of our relationship. And if I might end up finally, I am one who is old enough to remember the valiant sacrifice that was made by a Turkish battalion during the Korean War, where only one survived, to return to Turkey to tell the Turkish people of the bravery and courage and sacrifice of their fellow citizens. Thank you very much, and I'm ready to respond to any questions or comments or insults that you might have. Thank you very much.